If you're a producer, then this is going to be one of the most important videos that you watch all year. Matt shared with us so much great information. You definitely want to save this video because I can guarantee this is going to be one of those ones that you come back to many times throughout your career. Matt was gracious enough to join us on a live Zoom call with about roughly 100 producers where he went over a lot of great information. And we started off our conversation by going over one of the biggest red flags that producers need to look out for.
Producers, do not sign producer decks. A producer deck is what the label will send to you to try, or a manager to try to get your clearance so that they can release a song quickly. This is always an incomplete document, okay? It looks official, it is official, it comes from the label, but it'll say that the label will cover half of your advance. Okay, even in practice, despite the label ends up covering all of it, but it doesn't talk about your royalty, it doesn't talk about your publishing, it doesn't talk about your credit. All it talks about is you assigning the rights to them and the master in exchange for a fee so that they can feel comfortable with releasing the song. Whenever anybody sends you a producer deck, and it'll say declaration, producer declaration at the top. Whenever anyone sends you a producer declaration, say, I prefer to move to long form. I prefer to move to a producer agreement. I prefer, and at the very least, then use that as an opportunity to confirm all of those terms, like the stuff that's on my post that sparked this whole conversation, to confirm those terms via email with an attorney for the artist, okay? If it's an artist that's signed with the major label, they have a lawyer. So ask the lawyer to confirm the terms for you, and then you can always work out the contract later. Unfortunately, a lot of genres of music these days, we're working out contracts after the songs are out.
Yeah,
it's crazy, but it's true.
Really great. So declaration is kind of the red flag that producers need to look out for if they were to get this.
It's just an incomplete document. Why would we sign an agreement? Because then once you've given the label the rights, it's not that they don't care. It's just that they're not as pressured to get your deal done. Right?
Yeah.
And so if you already gave them the rights in exchange for just the fee, then you have not negotiated your royalty, your publishing, or your credit before this song could potentially come out and they would be within their rights. So you've chipped away at your leverage in a very big way.
I think a lot of producers don't really understand what a lawyer can help with when it comes to their production career and their business. So as far as that goes, could you explain what, I know you mentioned a couple of things there, but what you could be doing outside of just signing a contract for a producer to help in their career?
Yeah, I mean, you guys got to reformat how you're looking at yourselves. You guys are producers, you're talent, you're, creatives, but you're a business, you're a walking business. You have to remember that. And what does a business need? They need to have contractual protection. They need to protect their intellectual property rights, and they need to have a structure to the business, right? So depending on the state that you're in, like the state in the United States, or if you're overseas, which I have a lot of clients overseas, and this side of the conversation won't apply as much to those individuals on this call, unfortunately, but you can get at me later. But the inside the United States people, you should try to, ideally we're trying to minimize tax exposure. That's one thing. And we're trying to minimize our liability, right? And we're also, so for tax exposure, you set up a corporate entity so that you can get a business bank account. And then you can start writing things off. Like if you need to get a new MPC, if you need to go buy new software, you need to upgrade something, then you can go and do all of this. And then you can write a portion of that off on your taxes because that's equipment. Those are needs for your business. If you have to travel to Miami for a session from Atlanta or something like that, a portion of that travel expense should be write-offs. So setting up your corporate entity will help you keep your books straight and also give you that opportunity to do so with the tax exposure. So depending on the state that you're in and depending on your current tax bracket, which I'm not a tax attorney, there are specific tax attorneys out there, but you could also just talk to an accountant or somebody like that, whoever handles, your taxes now, and ask them where it would be best to set up. Now, noticed on your list that, you are asking when is the time to set up the business?
Yeah.
In a lot of states, it's relatively cheap to set up the business, and you can go get a bank account for free, and you can apply for an employer identification number through the IRS for free. So why not? Why would you not want to start structuring your business the right way? And also keep in mind that you may have investments in other areas of your life, or you may come from money, right? Like, and you may have like a bunch of money in your bank account. And if you get sued for something music producer related, if you don't have your money in a separate account for your music producer services, then if I'm suing you, I'm going to go after everything. You open yourself up to quite a bit of liability and exposure in other ways if you don't have an entity controlling your business.
That was going to be my next question. And with that, then, for the folks that might not know, what exactly is an LLC? I obviously understand that it is there to protect you so they can't directly sue. But do you have like a better explanation than that for the folks listening?
Yeah, I mean, it's literally, it stands for limited liability company. And I could do a whole class just on this, on corporations and stuff. But, you have a corporation, which is like, an S Corp, or C Corp, that's different tax classifications. And then you have an LLC, which is a limited liability company. The going structure, or the most used structure these days, is an LLC because it's relatively easy and cheap to form. It normally doesn't require a lot of documents, and it's normally relatively easy and cheap to maintain.
The next question I had for you then is just about when to actually find representation. I know there's a lot of producers right now, and potentially some in the chat here, who don't have that legal representation. So how do they begin finding and working with a lawyer like yourself? What would that process be for them?
Look, most people in this business are referred. 100% of my business is referral business.
Okay.
I take very little business off the street or off Instagram. I like to make sure that the people that I'm working with are ready to go at the level that I'm ready to go. Yeah. Right. But there's a lot of great lawyers out there. I mean, you can start with the bar, Georgia, Florida, Texas, Tennessee, California, New York. Those are our primary states. And I don't mean to leave any state out. Like, I'm not talking shit, but like, those are the primary states for entertainment lawyers, right? And because that's where the primary areas of entertainment are. So you can start by contacting the state boards of the bar examiners, and they'll have attorney referrals. Like, for instance, I'm a member of the entertainment and sports law section of the bar. So if you go and try to find attorneys in this space, my name will come up, So that's one way of going about it. Another way is asking your other producer friends, who else. And then if you get a placement, either a manager or somebody's going to reach out to you, but oftentimes it's also somebody at the label. Okay. You can ask the label for attorney referrals because, even if I'm referred, like I am every day, by the labels, they know that I'm not going to just do a deal with them. I'm going to press them. I'm going to do my job. Right. Yeah. And so, but at the end of the day, they also refer me a lot of business because they know that not only am I going to do my job, but I'm going to be fair and I'm going to close the deal with them. So as soon as you have something in black and white that you don't fully understand, that's when you need a lawyer. Period.
Yes. Big gem there. Hope you guys took that one down. And just speaking about, placements and getting that, why don't we actually go over some of the main points that were in that post there in person. But it was about what you should be negotiating when you get a placement. So the very first section of this post was the advance. So would you like to kind of quickly just go over it for the producers who might be in here who don't really understand what the advance is and what it goes against and all that type of stuff?
Yes, sure. So there's a big difference. There's an advance and then there's a fee, right? And an advance is recoupable against back-end royalties on the master, okay, on this, or the master of the sound recording, and a fee is not, okay? So a lot of writers receive a fee because they don't receive a master royalty. If you're receiving a royalty, it's going to be an advance. If it says a fee, if they're offering you a fee via email, you need to be like, wait, do you mean an advance? Because that would indicate that you're not receiving a royalty. And normally we have to make back the full advance amount plus all the recording costs, at least for that one particular song, before the producer sees any back-end royalty. Now, this is different than streaming, SoundExchange. This is different than publishing. This is different than credit. This is just the advance and then how that works with the royalty, which is the next thing, the next part of the post.
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, let's get into royalty and profit sharing.
Typically, price published to dealer, that is the PPD royalty. That is what most major labels operate on. Okay. It's like normally within a 3 to 5% range. with a 5% royalty recipient being on a very high level. The difference between 3 and 5% is exponential. It's very significant, right? And without like saying names, it's people that have been in the business for many years and have huge discographies that are constantly receiving a 5% royalty themselves versus the vast majority of producers, which isn't disrespectful, to receive a 3%. Like sometimes we get asked as lawyers, like, well, can we offer this producer 2% when I'm representing the artist? I'm not a fan of that because that's below industry standard. And if I was receiving a 2% offer, I'd be like, well, who's getting the other 1%, right? So now there's other reasons why, if you collaborate or if the artist produces along with you. And so one of the biggest things, the biggest questions that you guys should ask when you receive deal terms is, okay, what are the aggregate terms? Because a lot of people come to me where they haven't had legal counsel and they've agreed to terms, but then they find out later that their co-producer is getting 10 times more royalty, publishing, and advance than they are, but they've already approved. Watch your text messaging, guys. Like the fucking text messages get held against me every day. Like I'll be negotiating a deal and somebody will be like, well, but look at this text message from your client.
Okay. So when you say, when you say aggregate, what was it?
That's like the total. So if there's 3 producers involved, they're only going to email you to clear your side. They're going to be like, Jacob, we got $2,500, 1% PPD royalty, and 16% publishing. Okay. Now, if I saw that, I would expect that my aggregate terms would be 50% publishing across 3 producers, a 3% royalty across 3 producers, and 7,500, right? Because those are the collective terms. And that would mean that you had 1/3 of those terms.
Okay.
You follow me?
Yeah.
So, but if they come back and they're like, well, it's a $20,000 fee, you're like, well, why am I getting 2,500? I did 1/3 of the beat.
Okay. Very clear. Yeah.
Now there's other ways that this gets adjusted, guys. I mean, it's not as formulaic as that. And you need to keep it in mind. You have to be modest and humble about where you are in your career, period. And if somebody made a play happen because they work with Bryson all the time, and so Bryson picks up a beat and you know, you've never worked with Bryson, but you got on this one because you provided a loop, you might not have an equal share with that other producer. Yep. Okay. And so you need to be realistic and practical with that too. Yeah. Well, I just want to add one thing that's really quick about the profit share versus a royalty. The PPD royalty is like what a major label typically does. A lot of people are releasing through like an Empire or a one RPM or a Foundation Media where they're not paid on a PPD basis. They're paid on a net receipts basis. Even some of the major labels are paying artists on a net receipts basis. And so in that case, you don't want 3% of 80% because that 3% was like out of the artist's all-in royalty. And the artist's all-in royalty with a major label deal is anywhere between 15 to 19%. So it's 3 divided by 18. That's your proportion, right? And so you have to apply that same kind of math to net receipts because you're not accepting 3 out of 80. That's not the same math as 3 divided by 18. So you're asking for more when you're on a net receipt. So always what I do, guys, this is easy. This is always what you do. You say, is the artist paid on PPD? Okay, cool. Then I want 3% or I want 4% because that's what I always get. And then if it's, no, the artist isn't, then you say, okay, I want a 4% PPD, but I want the net receipts equivalent. And that's also on my post too.
What do you think is that balance or that perfect balance between getting what a producer thinks that they are worth or what they deserve while not jeopardizing the placement opportunity? Because I'm sure you've probably been in a million of those situations.
Like literally a million every day. This is a crazy business, guys. It's interesting as a lawyer to be in this business where we can't just go ham and cheese against everybody. We have to be super sensitive to relationships with a lot of like, and I mean this in the best way possible, but a lot of like emotion heavy creative types, And so a lot of things come off the wrong way and people take them the wrong way as you're trying to fuck up everything. And it's like, no, I'm just trying to get what I deserve, So here's what I do. You look at like when somebody comes to me, when they're negotiating really aggressively as a producer and I'm trying to clear them, I respectfully ask, okay, well, what's your placement history? Who have you worked with? Okay. What are your fees? Like, as much as they're willing to tell me. Now, some people say, fuck off, I don't have to tell you anything. And that's fine. They don't have to, but I'm trying to get a level of understanding, because if I haven't heard of you and you're coming to me saying, I'm charging you $5,000 to clear this beat, and I've never heard of you, I can't Google you, I don't find you on ASCAP, BMI, or CSAC, I don't see any placements, my label friends haven't heard of you, I'm gonna be like, no, you don't get $5,000 because you are not a $5,000 producer yet. I tell producers this all the time, and I represent 78 producers. If you fight on each song like it's your last song, it might be your last song. I'm not saying to give up and roll over. I'm absolutely not saying that. Okay. But just keep in mind everything that's going on. Like, are we really fighting for what's fair, or are we fighting out of ego? I always look at it this way, like, leverage your position based on business principles. Take the lawyer hat off and think like a businessman. How much of the beat did I do? That's number one. Then what was the effect of the stuff that I provided? Like, is my loop, yeah, it might be a loop, right? But is my loop like all of the guitars and they just added drums and maybe chopped it up? Or is it like my guitar loop was only used on the bridge? Look at the full inclusion of that and try to figure out exactly where you fit in, right? And then you start looking at the other players involved, okay? And then you start thinking about the other situation. Like, for instance, I've got some producer clients. They are not in love with some deal terms that are on the table right now. However, there's some other people, like the manager already hit them offline and said, hey, look, I want to set up a session with you guys. If we can get this done, like, it's on the books. I'll fly you guys to New York. Let's get back in. This is just the first project for this artist and we don't have the budget. If you guys can help me get this done, then what's up, Brazen? If you can help me get this done, then we'll move it forward. Like, we'll get you guys in another session.
I always tell producers, like, your net worth, your network is your net worth. Those relationships are super valuable. And I think what Matt was just saying there, super, super valuable. Definitely listen to what he was saying there. But a question I have, just on top of royalties and everything we're talking about, how exactly do royalty rates work? I know, like, producers hear a lot about percentages and stuff. And you even, talked about how, having 5% of a record, can over time lead to, some really good payment and some good checks and stuff. But how does that work? Because for a lot of producers, they just see a percentage and think, like, I don't know, where does that come out of thin air? You know what I mean? It's like,
it also depends on the lawyering of the contract. That is where the contract comes into play, because there's something called the recoupment basis, which there's and this is getting pretty nitty gritty, but there's master level recoupment and there's project level recoupment. You guys can kind of figure that out, but it's basically, are we as a producer on a particular song, am I standing behind the costs and expenses for the entire album project before I see a royalty, or just my song? It just depends on how much money they spend on it. I mean, like, you're not going to eat before the artist does. So if the song is wildly unrecouped, like, sometimes it's great to have a big feature, but if you put Drake on a feature, that you're 200, 500K plus already in the hole on that song. And so that's a lot of money to be made back before you can see that. Now, the question as to where these are coming from, they get paid by the label. Okay. And if the artist isn't signed to a label, make sure that they've got business management to pay you. You do not want to be dealing with an artist's accounting system. DistroKid comes in on a monthly basis or whatever it is, quarterly, I don't remember, but it comes in and it's like 500 pages long. Like, most people, myself included, are not going to sit there and read through 500 pages of, like, okay, it did this amount of numbers over in, in Africa, and this in Russia, and this in Eastern Europe. And then you got to break it down and calculate the math to find out how much each producer has to get paid. Like, so, it's normally going to come from the label to which the artist is signed, or the distributor, but you need to ask that, especially if it's a distributor. You need to ask, like, okay, well, is Empire paying me direct, or am I going to have to rely on you? So
number 3 in your post was SoundExchange. So for the folks that might not know what SoundExchange is, could you quickly just talk about that and how it could be helping in the negotiation?
Yeah, SoundExchange is the only federally endorsed agency that tracks the streaming plays of the masters. We have that master royalty that we just talked about, okay? That's on physical sales, interactive streams, digital downloads. Okay. That's on sales, right? Then we have the streaming, but SoundExchange, and this gets complicated. SoundExchange calculates the non-interactive streaming because interactive streaming is deemed a sale. Now, let me tell you what the difference is. If Jacob, you've got song A and I want to listen to song A, I go on Spotify and I type in Jacob song A and pull it up and play it. That's a sale. That's interactive because I selected it. However, if I go to Sean Christie's playlist and 5 songs deep or 2 songs deep, I play his random playlist on Spotify and Jacob's song A comes up, that is non-interactive. I didn't place it there, okay? I didn't choose to hear the song. The same applies to Pandora and XM satellite radio, okay? Because you don't get to control on Pandora what comes up next. You just play a playlist, right? Mm-hmm. And same with any of your other Spotify playlists that songs are just being fed to you. Those are non-interactive streaming, and it's calculated by SoundExchange, okay? SoundExchange, you get a percentage, but only if the artist executes a SoundExchange letter of direction in your favor, okay? SoundExchange is only automatic. This is super important. That's why I'm slowing down. Yeah. It's only automatic for featured performers, okay? Featured performers are all 3. So let's use song A again as an example. Jacob, if it's you on just song A, you are the featured performer, okay? Yep. If you add me as a feature, then you and I are both featured performers in the eyes of SoundExchange, okay? SoundExchange.com also has a ton of great information. Their frequently asked questions section is on point, okay? So you add me, and then now it's both of us. The income payable to the featured performers is automatically split by SoundExchange based on the number of featured performers, okay? So in the second case where I'm featured on song A, you and I each get 50% of the featured performer share automatically. Producers do not get an automatic share of SoundExchange. You have to ask for a letter of direction that has to be signed by the featured performer directing a percentage to you. When you're negotiating deal terms, you need to make sure that you are saying SoundExchange. There's some other genres that don't do SoundExchange, like the Latin music genre. Unfortunately, for whatever reason, you got to fight for SoundExchange. So just make sure that when you're negotiating deal terms, you say, I want this as a fee or advance. I want this as a royalty. I want SoundExchange. All you have to do is just say SoundExchange to make sure that it's there and that they are taking that into account.
Okay. Just quickly to piggyback off of what Fresh just said in the chat here, how do you go about, let's say SoundExchange, what if the person on the other side doesn't actually go through and, put the song in there and or correctly credit you, all that type of stuff? Is it then on, you as the lawyer to go and fix that up? Is it on us as the producer to contact people? Like how would we go about something like that when it's not being handled right?
When a song drops and you have publishing on the song, each person needs to register the song. Okay. Again, song A, it's Jacob featuring Matt, okay? It's produced by Fresh 808, right? Okay, so in this case, it's probably Fresh has 50%, and then you and I somehow bust down the writing side, the lyrical side, right? Okay, let's say it's even, okay? So it's 25, 25, and 50. Each one of us and or our publishers need to go in and register the song ourselves. I saw there was another question right above that. I didn't get all the way through it, but saying that they registered it and said that Nando was with ASCAP, but they said he was with BMI. He needs to go and re-register that. Okay. You can go and re-register it yourself. All right. Any issue that arises is going to be, it's going to cause a split dispute. Okay. And they may or may not notify you. Sometimes they do. If it's a bigger song, ASCAP or BMI will say, hey, there's a split dispute. You guys need to figure this shit out because we're not paying anybody until we get you guys figure this out. This is not our problem. You guys go back to the drawing board, figure it out. Right. And so you never can complain to ASCAP or BMI. If you have a signed document that says that these splits are supposed to be 25, 25, and 50, but then you go, Jacob, and you register this as 30, 20, 50, then I'm going to go and register 25, 25, 50 and cause a split dispute if you refuse to correct it. That is the way to do it. But don't go and re-register it differently, intentionally causing a split dispute unless you're 100% sure that you're right. Because if you cause a split dispute on a big song and you weren't right, you will look really bad.
I think this is a perfect segue into publishing, because you just kind of mentioned there as well too with these splits and stuff like that. Could you quickly kind of just run over publishing and I guess, when even a producer should be looking into getting a publishing deal, which is a question that I get a lot as well too.
Sure. Publishing is based on creative contribution. So like royalty is based on like your discography and based on your leverage in the business, same with your advance, right? It's based on like how big you are. But with publishing, it's traditionally based, and at least initially based, on how much you put in, because publishing is based on copyright. Okay. So how much did you put into the composition? That dictates how much publishing there is. Now, there are those circumstances, like Beyonce is coming out with a new project that I'm sure everybody saw. Beyonce doesn't write traditionally much, if any, of her music herself, right? Her lyrics herself. But Beyonce always gets a nice percentage of publishing because of who she is. You will have to deal with this in your career, 100%. So just be prepared for it. And again, go back to that earlier word of advice that I was trying to give, is like, take ego out of it and think practically. Like business wise, do I fight Beyonce and this song doesn't come out? Or do I give Beyonce that percentage and this song comes out? It's obvious you do the latter, right? Yeah. So I mean, and then as far as getting a pub deal, you want to make sure that somebody's administering your publishing on a worldwide and domestic basis. If you've had a song out for like 3 years, 2 years, and nobody's adminning you, you should go and talk to an admin company. But I'm not saying go take like an advance and don't go and do a long-term deal. There are companies out there like Song Trust, for example, that are intermediary, like interim period admin companies. Like, this song did really well. I want to put this one song with Song Trust so that Song Trust can make sure that I'm collecting worldwide. And I know that I don't need to put any other songs with Song Trust. And I know I can leave whenever I want to, but there might be like some little collection period. In the case of Song Trust, it's like a 12-month collection period after you terminate. So make sure that you have that. And then as far as like if you get a hit song, if you have 2.5% or more on a big song, like publishers will probably start reaching out to you.
Yeah.
Okay. That's number one. Then you know that it might be the time to like do a pub deal. But also you got to think about it this way. Like, at what stage of my career do I want to take a big check to like lock up all publishing revenues? That's a really individualized question and conversation. So I don't have like a blanket decision for you, except from that initial stance that I was talking about, which is, like, don't let songs sit unadministered for 2+ years, because you'll have revenues eventually go into what's called the black box. It's literally called the publishing black box. And that's where they just like, they didn't know who to pay. They didn't know how you were collecting. They couldn't find you. But bottom line is just, if you have a big song that you think is doing really, really well, or if you have a big song that you expect to do well, you should start thinking about it, Yeah. And you don't need to get the biggest advance, like you can always get in with a good company who's ensuring that you're getting your royalties. And then you'll see royalties and you'll be building with a big company. It's like, like a lot of people are just going for the bag, and the bag is sweet. It's really fucking cool. But like, it's also, that's money that goes away, gets spent, it's taxable, and then you see no royalties. So you have to have really good budgeting and business planning to like not burn through in advance,
The last thing that was on the post, which I guess most of us are looking forward to, is that wonderful credit. So as far as your advice for credit, what do you have to share with producers for that?
My producers are really cool about like sharing credit. Like most of them are like, yeah, whoever's name is bigger, you be first in position, like we don't care that much. My guys all collaborate really, really well together, and with people that I don't rep as well. So I rarely have a credit issue, but there are certain things where you could fall into the co-production or additional production. Try to stay away from that unless you really did do just additional production, which is like adding some instrumentation at the very end of a basically finished beat or something like that. But if you produced, I mean, I like to see produced by Jacob, Sean, Benjala, I'm sorry if I pronounced that wrong, Damien, you know what I mean? Yeah. Like, that's what I want to see. I want to see just like everybody on one line and you guys figure it out, right?
Yeah. It's funny that you said, the producers you deal with are so good, because when I put up our post, God bless Eli, Base Charity, Brian, all the homies that I know, they have that strong work ethic, but they're really good when it comes to this stuff, all hit me saying, Matt's the man. So, the type of people you're dealing with are great. But I really appreciate you going over those 5 main points. Again, we shared the post. Matt shared the post. His Instagram is in the chat there. But I would love to open up the chat for you guys, because we have Matt for like another roughly 15 minutes here. If you're still cool to stick around.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm here. I'm going to look at this chat in the meantime too.
Yeah.
Admin versus co-publishing is that in an admin deal, it's you retain all of your ownership. They usually take a smaller percentage, anywhere between 20 and 10% the company takes. You get the rest. And you're not really, it's normally a smaller check because you're not giving them ownership. And you're also not normally availed to their A&R department. They're not normally like going out and finding sync opportunities and putting you in rooms, as opposed to a co-publishing deal where they own half of your compositions, or at least your share of those compositions. It's normally a bigger check. It's normally a longer deal, and you get to work more with their staff and helping like grow your songwriting and composing career.
Okay, cool. So yeah, we have another question here, just talking about Spotify and credits, which actually happened to a friend of mine recently too. How much time do you have to wait until the label modifies this, or do you have to kind of push them to fix this?
So first of all, this is my best word of advice. Some people don't agree with me. Some people like to go scream at the labels. I think that's the worst fucking thing you can do. Be nice to the business affairs people at the labels. They cut your checks. They make sure your credit's there. Don't yell at them, these people. It's like going into the post office and yelling your head off at a post office employee. You will be ignored. Don't do it. There's zero point in doing that. It doesn't make you look good. Like, so if you're chasing checks and stuff, just try to be patient. It takes a long time. It's a headache, And then as far as getting credit updated, I mean, fortunately, with the age of with digital age, and most projects are being released digitally only, they should be able to update those things. And it normally takes anywhere between, 24 to 72 hours to see an update. Just be nice and just, and because if you're nice and polite, I mean, I'm from the South, man. So like, you kill more bees with honey than vinegar, right? So I like if they're jerking you around, that's a different story. Consult a lawyer and figure out what the fuck's going on. But like normally they update that pretty quickly.
Okay. Al says, why do some lawyers take a percentage from deals they handle versus some work on retainer? And I guess why, to build on top of that, for producers out there, why is there that difference, and which way should they kind of think about going with a lawyer?
It just depends case by case. I mean, look, like, for instance, I have an hourly rate, which I'll discuss with whoever wants to know on the side, but like my hourly rate is what I need to see when I'm closing producer deals. Mm-hmm. So I might not, the normal lawyer percentage is 5%. I've seen some lawyers take more. I've seen some like accept less, but I normally want 5%, but subject to like my hourly. Okay. Because if you're doing placements for $1,000, 5% is not worth me putting in 3 to 5 hours of time on a producer agreement from the beginning to the finish. I have retainer-based clients as well that put, 5 figures of money into my account at the beginning of each month, but they call me. They're like independent labels. They call me, they text me, they have me running their show for them. Some lawyers are like, I charge $750 to handle a producer agreement. Don't care what you get. Don't want a percentage. If you get $50,000, I'm still at $750. If you get $500, I'm still at $750. So it really just depends on who you're dealing with and in specific situations.
Okay, great. This next question from Damien is actually an interesting one. What happens when the exact same sample / loop is used? And has that ever been a problem that you've run into?
Dude, my guys base charity like every day. These guys are blessed to have so many amazing connections with very top producers, right? So as loop makers, they are sending the same loop packs to their friends, right? And they don't know this business is wild. Like some of these loops get picked up 3 years after they sent them, right? And we have to go back to the record and be like, is that even our loop? Okay, that's our loop. Shit. All right. Did somebody else have this? What you can sometimes do, and I'm not telling you that this is an everyday thing, okay? And if you keep doing it with labels, they're gonna be like, this is not our business model. But sometimes I've been successful in that specific circumstance where I'm like, I've got artist A and I've got artist B, and they both want the loop, but the songs sound different. It's okay for us to use these loops labeled. I mean, this is me like, petitioning, like being a salesman, like your songs sound different, even though there's a little bit of the same material. And then I ask them to do a non-exclusive usage of that. I deem it a sample clearance in that case versus assigning the ownership. Now that doesn't happen all the time, guys. It really doesn't. It's a lot more work. Sometimes you have to make the choice.
Noah says, I have a question. Let's say a song I co-produce appears in a TV commercial or a big video game, etc. What do I have to do as a producer to get money from it? So I think he's referring here to syncs.
I mean, they should have contacted you. I don't know why they didn't, but they should have. And you should try to track down the production company or the sync company that was handling the syncs. You can often find this in the credits of these programs. There's going to be a music licensing department for each of these film and TV houses. And so trying to contact them or trying to find, okay, well, my buddy's song also got on here. Who reached out to you, buddy? And then if you contact the legal department of most of these big companies, like NBA, 2K. I mean, look, most of these guys are really, really good. Sometimes people do get overlooked. It happens. I would start with looking at the production company. And if you can find out who the sync company, the clearance company that was doing it, that'd be the first step on that.
Okay. Matt, got one more question from you. It's actually a question for me. I just know there's a lot of producers here in the chat that might be selling samples online, beat, MIDI packs. From your standpoint, what is the process for them protecting themselves so that they don't get into some sort of, legal situation with what they're doing online and stuff like that?
Like, what do you mean exactly? I
mean, like, let's say I'm selling sample packs online. I get something placed and now the label's coming to me like, oh no, we're not going to you're not co-producer. We're not going to pay you for this. Like, and they're, I just know a lot of individuals are like,
I got you. Well, I've written terms and conditions of use for people that are selling their beat packs. If you go to certain websites, they have terms and conditions of use. You need to make sure that those are good. Mm-hmm. And then there's other companies like Splice that very clearly say these are royalty and publishing free. So you, when you're signing up for those sites, need to make sure that you're reading and understanding. Because if you do a Splice pack, sometimes depending on the pack style and the way that they're releasing it, you won't get any publishing. You won't get any royalty. All you get is a percentage of the revenue from the sales of that pack, right? Then there's other sites that do have specific terms and conditions of use. For instance, the ones that I've written for my clients that say you can use this promotionally, you can use this non-commercially, but the minute you put it up for sale or the minute you start monetizing it, we get a percentage of royalties, we get a fee, we get publishing, and you better contact us or we're taking it down. We don't care that you paid advice. Somebody else asked, like, do you need an attorney for every placement? I mean, no, if you get it, if you understand everything that you're signing over, then why you don't? But like, if you don't understand, then yes, please do.
Okay, actually, that was a good last question then. If you don't know, like, what can somebody do if they feel like they don't have the money to invest into a lawyer or something like that? Is there any sort of resources and stuff? Obviously, we don't want someone to go out and try and sign and make their own deal so they don't have the information. But what could you suggest for the producers that can't necessarily, get someone on retainer or potentially pay? Or do you think it's just better to pay to have that legal representation to make sure you don't get screwed?
I mean, look, like, lawyers are a necessary evil. I mean, unless you really dive in and teach yourself. And even still, a lot is not learned in the books. A lot is learned in practice, and after doing this for over a decade, I know a lot about a lot of the nuances that aren't so obviously like apparent in the books,
For sure.
So it's just going to take time. It takes time. But if you don't know, then invest in yourself. You've got to spend money to make money, guys. Like, you'd much rather spend a little bit more money and maybe lose in the short term to protect your asset in the long term versus like be cheap and then lose your ass in the long term, you know? And you're like, damn it, why did I give away that amount of publishing? Why did I not get a royalty? Why didn't I get SoundExchange, you know?
Well, listen, I appreciate your time. You guys can feel free to unmute, give a big round of applause here for Matt if you want, because
thank you guys so much.
That was honestly amazing. Very transparent. I really appreciate what you're doing for the community, and on behalf of everybody that was here today, like, thank you so much, Matt. Really, really appreciate it. Go follow Matt on Instagram. It's up there on your screen. And if you click the link in his bio, you can actually chat with him for 5 minutes. If you have any questions, go check that out. Big shouts out to him. Thank you so much for joining us on the call. I think this information was super important, and I'm glad that we're just able to share it with the community. My name is my best friend Jacob. I'm here for Software Audio, where we're trying our best to just inform the community. I really appreciate you guys checking out this video, and we'll see you again soon.